Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Progress America Unfiltered. It's Tyler. I'm here today with Rhett and Linda to talk about a couple of things that have been going on in the news cycle. We're going to talk about McCarthy and his former job, the speakership, and who has been lined up to replace him. We're going to talk about something called PodiumGate, which I'm very excited to learn more about. And we're also going to dive into what's going on with disgraced Senator Menendez. So let's kick it off in that order and start talking about what's going on in the Speaker of the House. My favorite meme right now is what is going on in the House of Commons. We don't have a House of Commons in America, but what is going on in our House of Representatives? So Linda, Rhett, do either of you want to take it away and give us a brief overview of what is going on?
So real quick, as of last week, Kevin McCarthy, no longer the Speaker. Matt Gaetz led a rebellion and deposed him. And so now Republicans are trying to figure out who they want the next Speaker to be. And it sure seems like there's nobody who can get all the Republicans to line up and support. They, put forward Steve Scalise, but it really seems like a lot of the Republicans are saying, no, we're not going to support him. And he does not have the numbers that he needs to get to 218, which, because of the way that electing a speaker works, like, they don't just need half of the House. They need half of the full House, and Republicans have only a very narrow majority in the House. So what that means is that whoever is going to be Speaker can only lose a few Republicans if they're going to win, at least unless if they're going to consider making a deal with Democrats and winning with Democratic votes, so Hakeem Jeffries or perhaps a compromise candidate. But so far, it just does not seem like any Republicans are open to that. Kevin McCarthy refused to make any overtures at all to Democrats before losing his job. And yeah, they're all about their egos. George Santos says he's not going to support Steve Scalise because Steve Scalise never bothered to court him properly, really ask for his support. And that's just the level of emotional immaturity that we're dealing with here.
Yeah, absolutely, Linda. And just to think that Republicans cannot get it together, like we always talk about just like the absolute crisis that is Republican politics that is being played out in the House of Representatives and beyond. But, through these past few weeks, the dysfunction has become even more clear from those in leadership within the Republican Party. They cannot even get a Speaker of the House together so they can do some of the awful things that they do agree on as a caucus. So they might not agree on who is a Speaker as the caucus, but they do agree on an agenda that is absolutely not great for the American people. And so I just really, it just really does show this continued dysfunction throughout the caucus. But from like my position, and I do work in advocacy as well, particularly for cannabis legalization in America, I was having this conversation that was just like, how are we right now, like, how do we push the ball forward on these major policy initiatives that we care so much about when they can't get it together to be effective in their organization against us, right? Like they're not putting forward policy right now as harmful as they usually are because they don't even have the administrative process for being able to do that. So it's like a little weird position in this advocacy, but I'm happy to kick them while they're down.
Totally. And yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Rhett. I think this is just another example of right-wing chaos and incompetence that we've allowed to fester in the House of Representatives. I also think it's important to point out that the person who has been chosen for this nomination, who will be voted on, Steve Scalise, here's what I'll say. South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace, who I do not align with in any way, shape, or form, did one thing right. A broken clock can be right twice a day. And she said that she won't vote for him because he spoke at a white supremacist rally, 20-something years ago. And that's something that we should not forget. And this is a person who is being elevated to one of the highest positions in the House, if not the highest position in the House of Representatives, a person who spoke at a white supremacist rally. So kind of shocked that broken clock Nancy Mace was right about that once a day, and just kind of disgusted to see that this is the person that is being put forth to replace McCarthy. Making a mistake, I'm not a McCarthy fan whatsoever. But the fact is, he was ousted by extreme right-wing MAGA factions of his party, and he is now being replaced by somebody who aligns with the white supremacist ideals of that right-wing faction. So I'm pretty disappointed, but we'll see whether or not he wins this vote.
Yeah, so Nancy Mace, I mean, what a person. It really seems like she's just driven by what is going to get me on TV, what's going to get me attention at any given time. And it just seems like this one time, the answer to that question happened to be call out Steve Scalise for his white supremacy and help stop him from becoming Speaker. So probably one of the only times I'll say this, but good on you, Nancy Mace. I do wonder, though, has anyone talked to her about that? What would really get her a lot of attention in TV interviews would be endorsing Hakeem Jeffries or a compromise candidate for Speaker and leading a few other relatively moderate Republicans in actually making the House function. Because I do think, Rhett makes a good point that, do we actually want these people to, be making any kind of policy? Is it kind of better that they're in chaos? But the problem is that the government's going to run out of funding around Thanksgiving, and there's also geopolitical crises right now in Ukraine and the Middle East. And so we do need a functioning Congress, House of Representatives, and, whichever Republicans, perhaps cross over, make a compromise to make that happen, they're really going to get a lot of that cable news attention that certain people, cough Nancy Mace, cough George Santos, love so very much.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing I'll add on the Nancy Mace topic as well is, her choosing not to vote for Steve Scalise because of the reasons that Tyler outlined, him speaking at a white supremacist rally. What would be a more actual stance from her is okay, maybe she's gonna take a step back and realize, gee, I'm part of the political party in Congress that is going to overwhelmingly support this individual to be the Speaker of the House. But that doesn't register as the call to action for her to step out of the Republican Party. So she's as we all are kind of alluding to, okay with it enough that she's actually going to change her direction in the House of Representatives. But yeah, good for some cheap cable news shots for sure.
Yeah, it's a bummer. Steve Scalise has called himself David Duke without the baggage, and that's just not the kind of man that I think we should have, quite literally speaking, for the House of Representatives. But anyway, we'll find out pretty soon if he's going to be. So I'm sure we'll come back to this topic next week when we have a little more insight and more answers. And who knows, maybe we'll be 15 votes later. But shifting gears a little bit, we wanted to talk about some updates going on with disgraced Senator Menendez and his corruption and some other forms of corruption that we've been seeing pop up in states across the country, specifically Arkansas. So who wants to give us a quick update on what's going on with Mr. Menendez?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, so Senator Menendez of New Jersey, a Democrat, has been facing calls to resign over some recent charges that he got. So prosecutors have charged Senator Menendez with acting as an agent for Egypt, which is shedding light on his very unethical international kind of practices. And so his accusations include accepting bribes and his just general corruption with high-ranking political figures from Egypt. But it is just showing, I think, just how the Democratic caucus, or just the larger community too, has really just kind of joined forces and saying, yeah, we're not going to accept this. We do want him to resign. And so I subscribe to a lot of different progressive organizations, and the emails that they sent out. I know there's a petition being circulated widely from organizations, including Women Without War. We're going to sign on to it over at Bullpack, calling on him to resign. So I think this kind of shows that in the progressive space, I like to think that we hold ourselves to a higher standard for when corruption does become evident. We do believe that there is corruption in the government. That is not a controversial take at all. We know that corruption is there, but I think it's in our realm as progressive people to call it out where we see it. So I'm really happy to see there's this unity around calling Senator Menendez to resign, even though he's in the Democratic Party. What do you two think?
Yeah, I do think it's good to see Democrats holding our own accountable when they do things like accept bribes in the form of gold bars and working as agents of foreign governments. It's good to see that he has a primary challenger already, Andy Kim, who is a very solid lawmaker, also known for helping to clean up after January 6th, and is just someone who's, sort of quietly very solid, doesn't seek the spotlight, seems like a very, good and humble person. And also, this is a big deal in New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey. As far as I know, he doesn't have ties to any of the major party bosses or machines, unlike Menendez, who is just very much a creature of the New Jersey political establishment. Yeah, so almost the entire New Jersey House delegation has called on Menendez to resign, the exception being Menendez's own son, who is a member of the House because New Jersey.
Nepotism.
Love it. I think what I've learned through all of this is that total, as they say, absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think we called it out when we saw it with Clarence Thomas. We need to call it out with Menendez. We're about to call it out with Sarah Huckabee Sanders and PodiumGate. But I think at the end of the day, we need more protections, and we need better protections and higher expectations of the people that we're placing in power in order to protect from this. I think we made it clear that just the honor code and the honor system isn't doing enough to protect these positions from being corrupted due to the influence of money and outside influence into our politics. So with that little segue, we need to get into the head scratching that I have around PodiumGate. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, another nepotism baby, by the way, since her father was governor of Arkansas, and she is now the governor of Arkansas, has released a new scandal onto the world, PodiumGate. Linda, I know you know a little bit about it. Can you give us the 411?
Yeah, so very simplified version. It appears that she spent almost $20,000 on a podium, or at least claimed to. We're not sure exactly where that money went. And then when it was a freedom of information request was put in to get that information, she altered the documents to try to hide it. And yeah, that would be a felony.
Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders has not, after she was White House press secretary and she left that posting, I think that some in the progressive space is expected for her to kind of fade into the background of corporate consulting or lobbying, anything like that. But now she's following the footsteps of her father, governor of Arkansas, and the corruption definitely is following suit as well. Yeah, not too surprised about this PodiumGate story. I feel also just from an elite ruling class vibe, these altered documents that say, oh, I spent $20,000 on a podium, kind of remind me of when they asked, I think it was Jeff Bezos, how much a bag of potato chips, I'm butchering that story, cost, and he was $20 or something. They're like, oh yeah, a podium, that's $20,000. Yeah, that's just kind of the same vibe, like the really wealthy, kind of removed from what we would all flag as outrageous spending, or really just sort of just bad spending, doesn't really register for them. So just one of these, just another story of corruption from people in the government. What's new?
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. This story really, so far, has only been in a few left-leaning outlets. It hasn't really made national news compared to, say, Menendez's story, which is all over the place. And I think to an extent that's because we just expect Republicans to be corrupt.
Totally. And I think one thing I want to underscore during all of this, this is the people of Arkansas's money that she's spending on this podium. This isn't her money. This isn't this isn't even outside money like what Menendez is rolling in and his gold bars. This is taxpayer money in Arkansas that is being spent on something that they have no clue what it's going to, because it certainly isn't going to a podium. So I think that is where the insidiousness is. And that's why we can't, let stories like this fly under the radar. That is just money from Arkansas citizens that is just unaccounted for, and we don't know where it's going. And at the end of the day, this is the type of corruption that we need to root out. No matter who is perpetrating it, no matter what party it is, it needs to be stopped. Well, on that note, I think those were our top 3 stories for today. Rhett, Linda, any last words? I think the only thing I have left to say for myself is that we need to elect officials who will make sure that they themselves cannot continue committing these kind of crimes and these kind of greed-based decision-making, whether that's term limits, whether that's increased oversight. We need to put an end to it, because I just don't see how we can continue with story after story after story this year of corruption. Linda, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. And we, I guess meaning, House Republicans or perhaps Democrats, if they're willing to work with them, also need to elect a speaker ASAP who will fund the government without making massive cuts to our vital programs.
We love to see it, and we will be here watching, and we'll keep you guys updated at Progress America Unfiltered. Tune in next week, wherever you like to see us, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, and we will talk to you guys next time. Bye.